for inviting me here today. My name is Alexis and I'm a senior at the University of New Mexico. Concussions have greatly altered my life, and I appreciate the opportunity to take an advocacy role in concussion awareness. I've played soccer since I was 4, and I've always been a high-achieving student athlete. In high school, I was New Mexico Gatorade Player of the Year and our valedictorian. By my junior year in college, I was an academic All-American, captain of my team, and had received first-team All-Conference honors. However, for as many awards as I have accumulated, I have accrued about as many concussions. I was medically disqualified from playing collegiate athletics in December 2009. This decision came after a season of struggle following 2 concussions I sustained in the beginning of the season.
Ms. Ball, what you're saying is so important and so moving and powerful that I want you to slow down just a tiny bit so we don't miss a syllable.
I'm sorry.
Okay?
Okay. During preseason, I was offered the opportunity to shadow a doctor in the ER. A man came in with a knee laceration, which I was not prepared to see. I fainted and hit my head. It was clear I had a concussion due to the dizziness, vomiting, and seizures that followed. My coaches were not pleased when I called them the following morning, informing them of the concussion. In accordance with the team doctor's requirements, I sat out for a week. After that week, I met with him again. He asked me the normal concussion questions: do you have a headache? Are you dizzy? Can you remember these 3 words? I was still experiencing headaches and bouts of dizziness at the time, but it was the week of our first game and I wanted to play. Thus, I supplied the necessary answers to get cleared. I played for about 2 weeks with minimal issues. However, in our 3rd game, I took a header on the top of my head. I was not able to stand up and needed assistance to lead the field. I had sustained another concussion. I sat out for about a week and returned to play. However, the weeks following this concussion were horrible. I was playing terribly and simply was not myself. I was no longer able to sleep at night. I would fall asleep around 3 o'clock in the morning after lying restlessly in my bed since 10 p.m. the night before. I could not pay attention in any of my classes. However, the most disturbing change was the twist in my personality. I no longer enjoyed partaking in anything. I would go to practice and feel void of emotion, or I would begin crying randomly in the middle of practice. I would also sit in my room and stare into space, not comfortable in my own body. I did not know who I was anymore. I thought that Alexis, the high-achieving student athlete, was permanently gone. My mom was seriously concerned about my well-being and forced me to go see my doctor. I told him about all my struggles, and he too was rather concerned. In an effort to see what was happening, I took a neuropsych test. The test revealed that my visual memory was impacted. I now fall in the 20th percentile of all people for visual recall. And my doctor also explained that I was experiencing prolonged symptoms from the combination of the 2 concussions I had sustained months prior. I was shocked. My doctor and I also talked about the status of my future in soccer. We had talked about implications for my future if I were to sustain another concussion. I had already accumulated 10 concussions in about 8 years, most of which while wearing protective headgear. The doctor concluded that for the safety of my future, I should hang up my cleats. This was a crushing blow, yet one that needed to be done. Ultimately, I had to separate my head from my heart. Concussions are a very serious insult to your brain. People frequently claim an athlete just sustained a concussion like it's no big deal. Too often, coaches, athletes, and parents dismiss the severity of concussions because it is not a visible injury. If an athlete tears their ACL or sprains their ankle, it is apparent externally that they are injured. This is not the case with concussions. A doctor or coach often cannot see the physical manifestations of a concussion. Moreover, many of the symptoms of post-concussion syndrome are not easily associated with the initial blow. I had no idea that my insomnia or the sadness I had felt could be correlated to an injury that I had sustained in the months prior, which is something I really want to emphasize today. Athletes must be aware that if they sustain a concussion, symptoms can last longer than a few days, or weeks for that matter. They can last your a lifetime. And another issue athletes need to be aware of is the limited efficacy of headgear or helmets. I wore protective headgear since my 2nd concussion in high school, per the recommendation of my trainers. It was supposed to be a preventative measure against concussions, and clearly this did not hold true. I sustained about 8 concussions since wearing that. It is essential for athletes and coaches to know that athletes are not free from concussions because they have protective headgear. Furthermore, I believe it is important to note that the mentality to return to play as quickly as possible is very prevalent in the world of athletics. There's a lot of pressure on athletes to just deal with their injuries, or they will be in jeopardy of losing their starting position or playing time. This culture is an environment in which it is really easy to lie about your symptoms, especially when it comes to concussions. I knew the answers needed to return to play. No one could prove whether I had a headache or not, so I was apt to lie. In retrospect, this was a very poor decision, but I did not understand the severity of concussions at the time. I continued to play much longer than I probably should have due to the high number of concussions I had throughout my career, and I most certainly returned to play too quickly. People have only one brain for life. I will never regain the visual memory I once had. I will also not be able to gain the respect I lost while I struggled through my final season of soccer. I hope from my story you have learned that concussions and brain injury are not a minor injury. In order to prevent more stories like mine, concussion awareness needs to be more prevalent among coaches and athletes in our society. I believe that most coaches and athletes do not truly understand the long-term ramifications of concussions. And people also need to understand that wearing protective gear does not stop concussions from occurring. Therefore, I want to thank you again for inviting me here today in a step to further public education about this invisible injury.
Thank you. You did extremely well. Mr. Stephen Threet, who's a student at Arizona State University, was a quarterback and